Do 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 da 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 da. Hello and welcome to Enchantment of Eternity's review for Final Mission, which is episode 9 of season 4 of Star Trek The Next Generation. This video is a part of a series of videos where I review episodes of Star Trek The Next Generation, one episode at a time. In this video, I cover the 4th season episode, Final Mission. So Final Mission is the episode where Wesley is finally accepted into the Starfleet Academy, so Picard decides to go on one final mission with him to this mining dispute or negotiations or whatever, but they go in the shuttlecraft of one of the miners who is an incompetent drunk, and so they crash on a planet on the way there, and it's a desert planet, I should say, that barely supports life, and they're trapped in the desert with no food or water because the pilot was incompetent, and so they have to walk to the mountains. When they get to the mountains, they find a water fountain that is magically protected by a magical force field, and Picard is severely injured while trying to phaser the force field, and then the idiot pilot, idiotically gets himself killed by the force field, but then Wesley manages to use his smarts in a tricorder in order to take the force field down and get Picard some water. Meanwhile, the Enterprise is too busy trying to haul off this garbage scow that is endangering a planet and trying to get rid of it, and so they weren't able to rescue Wesley. But once they're done with the mission, it just so happens to be after Wesley gets the water, and they save Wesley and Picard says his farewells to Wesley as he leaves the show for good. So that little the musical thing at the start of the episode that I did at the in my little intro there is what I think of whenever I think of this episode. In fact, I remember going on some really long hikes where my back was hurting from carrying a pack and my feet were tired and I felt like I'd been walking forever, where I started humming that music to myself because it's the music they play when Picard, Wesley, and idiot guy, what was his name, Durgo, are walking through the desert. And it's good music. In fact, I was almost put it on I made an honorable mention in my top 10 musical soundtracks, but the reason why I didn't is because I don't like this episode, even though the music was good there. The music just makes me think of boringness. So, for that reason, I didn't include it on my top 10. So, Wesley, as I've been talking about, barely appeared in season 4. He was in the episode Remember Me. He had an important role to play, but other than that, and that was a Beverly Crusher episode, so he wasn't even the main focus. But other than that, he had one or two lines of "I, sir," or suggesting something stupid, like in the episode Brothers, and that was it. He barely, ever since he got that red uniform, they barely utilize him. So it kind of makes sense that Will Wheaton would want to leave the show because his character is underutilized. However, apparently I've heard that there's more to the story than just that apparently, and this is no surprise seeing how Rick Berman is infamous for being an asshole to a lot of actors, apparently there was this high, I'd never heard of this movie, but it was a high profile movie that Will Wheaton really wanted to do, and it was get his foot in the door, and he could make a name for himself and become sort of a lot more well known, get his career going. And he asked, Rick Berman if he could just skip one episode, so he could go do the film. And Rick Berman was like, no, you can't. We need you too much for this episode. And then he found out that he was written off entirely for that episode. And so, it was speculated that Rick Berman, the reason why he did that is because he didn't want Wil Wheaton's career to go higher. He didn't want Wil Wheaton to become a bit of a well-known star because he would ask for more money in order to stay on Next Generation. So that's apparently Wil Wheaton's side of the story. I believe it, though, hearing everything I've heard about Rick Berman. But I heard that there was a similar case about that in the episode, God, what was that episode? Ensigns of Command, but that was all the way back at the start of season 3, so was he still holding a grudge from that? And it was just confounded by the fact that they weren't giving him much to do, or did it happen again? That I'm not very clear on. But either way, I can completely and totally understand Wil Wheaton's desire to leave. Because regardless of the Rick Berman trying to ruin his career, but if you notice, he didn't exactly become a movie star after he left Next Generation. In fact, the movie he's most well known for was made before he joined the cast of Next Generation, which is Stand By Me. I think I remember seeing him in this movie called Toy Soldiers. That came out around, I think it must have just been shortly after, or maybe it was like 91, so this episode came out, late 90s, so it must have been very shortly after, with Sean Astin. It was about these terrorists to take over a school, and I remember seeing the commercial over and over again where the terrorist guy was like, "Did you think I was kidding?" But Wil Wheaton played like a teenage malcontent who always broke the rules, and if I remember correctly, he got killed by the terrorists. Spoiler warning. Anyway, he wasn't the main character, but that's the only thing I remember. I'm sure he's been in other movies. I didn't bother to look up his IMDb, but he didn't become a movie star is the main point. And neither did Michelle Forbes when she left Star Trek. She ended up going back to TV. The things I most well known her for is Outer Limits, the best episode of Outer Limits, and one of the best three-parters in Battlestar Galactica. So that's what we did California, but that was it. But anyway, sorry, I'm getting off on a tangent here. Point is, Wil Wheaton wanted to leave the show, so they wrote him a episode where he actually did have something to do. Now, I mentioned before how season 4 is when they start doing the A-plot, B-plot, where the B-plot is some useless, anomaly, BS bullshit, blah, 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 and the A-plot is, some character story. And this episode kind of qualifies, it's not exactly an anomaly, it's a garbage scow leaking radiation, but same concept. It's the same story function as a bullshit anomaly. It's just a bullshit dilemma for the Enterprise to solve. And you could say this is more than just a character story for Wesley, because it's about them being trapped in the desert and Picard near death, but it's mainly a character story. That's the main point of it. So, there are more obvious examples of this A-plot, and I'm not saying this is the first time Next Gen ever did A-plot, B-plot, because you might be thinking, well, Mark, there's all these episodes in Season 2 and Season 3 where they clearly did A-plot, B-plot. Yeah, I know, but that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying the A-plot is a character story, and the B-plot is some bullshit dilemma that is bullshit and just there to waste space. Most of And I actually talked about this as I went through season 3, and I said this is one of the reasons why I thought season 3 was better than season 4, is because whenever they did the A plot, B plot structure, they made both plots relevant, and sometimes they did a really good job of connecting the two plots and making them sort of work in tangent, which is what I'm talking about, is that B plot, which has the scientific dilemma bullshit, has absolutely nothing to do with the A plot. And this is unfortunately a formula that they would repeat over and over again from now on. I think season 4 and season 5, if I remember correctly, are the main offenders. I don't think they do it as much in season 6 or 7, but definitely season 4 and 5. Particularly 5, I think they get out of the hand with it in season 5. And Voyager does it a lot. And honestly, I think that might have been a trait, a combination of Jerry Taylor and Rick Berman. Because Jerry Taylor likes to do the character story. She, by the way, co-wrote this episode. And, of course, she would go on to become the showrunner and producer on Voyager. And which is why Voyager goes crazy with it. But Jerry Taylor likes the character stories, likes the straight-out explore character stories. So the reason why I say it's a combination of her and Rick Berman, because I'm sure Rick Berman is the one who forces her to do a stupid B-plot dilemma bullshit so they can have a thread of the week, which he tried to do in Family, but eventually let that one go. But I know in the future he won't let it go. So that's why I'm saying it's a combination of Jerry Taylor and Rick Berman, because she wants to do a character story and he wants to, well, if you're going to do a character story, you got to have this bullshit dilemma that nobody gives a shit about. And thus we get this shitty ass formula. And I do believe this is the first one, even though it doesn't fully qualify. I think it qualifies enough. It's not like textbook. Like next week's episode, I don't know if that's textbook. But it's a lot closer to textbook than this episode. The episode I'm thinking of, in theory, towards the end of the season, that's textbook. What's the one? Cost of Living with Alexander and Loaxana Troy, and they have some stupid B plot about the replicate. I don't know some bullshit thing that was disabling the Enterprise. That's textbook. So those are the ones I'm thinking of, and I'm sure there's more I'm going to pick up on as I run through. But I really think this is the first one, because it makes a reference to Samaritan Snare, and you could say, oh, maybe that was one, because that the A plot was Geordi being, the threat of Geordi being captured by the the Pack-Leds, and the B plot was the character story of Picard bonding with Wesley. But to me that doesn't qualify, because first of all, the A plot was the threat, not the B plot. For the formula I'm talking about, the A plot is the character story, and the B plot is some throwaway threat, which I know a lot of people didn't like Samaritan Snare, but it was a more thought out threat than simply, here's some bullshit anomaly, bullshit, like in this episode, it's a bullshit garbage scow the Enterprise has to tow, but there's an asteroid belt in their way. Oh no! It's not like space is not 3 fucking dimensional and they could just go underneath or above the goddamn asteroid belt and just fling the ship into the sun. Or I heard another suggestion that they could have just taken the ship out of orbit and just flung it somewhere else where it's not going to harm someone, and be like, wait a second, we're going to go save our fucking captain and Wesley's life, and then go do that, and then come back and get rid of the guy, throw it into the sun so it doesn't bother anyone. Just get rid of the immediate danger where no one's in danger whatsoever. It's just you can't leave it there permanently because something else might happen with it. So if you come back with plenty of time before it bothers anyone else, and then destroy it. So it's obvious, and so the B plot was a huge contrivance, which is they always are in this format. The B plot is always a goddamn contrivance. There's some bullshit anomaly or science dilemma or some sort of dilemma that doesn't really have anything to do with anything. It's not very particularly interesting. It's not well thought out. And to be honest, with a lot of these episodes, the character story is not that particularly interesting either. Well, I'll get to the one in this episode shortly, but that applies like tenfold for the next episode I'm going to review, which is The Lost, by the way, if you lost track. But anyway, so yeah, so the B plot was a wash. It was just total bullshit. Just a waste of time, a contrived excuse so the Enterprise would have something occupy them before they could go. I mean, they could at least given more thought to what would be occupying the Enterprise, maybe connected to the actual fucking episode or, the A-plot somehow, but no, it was just a waste. And this is a format, as I said, that we'll see tons of time, and I will call it out every time we see it. Which is why Season 3 is better than Season 4. Because it did a much better job of integrating the A and B plot. But anyway, on the episodes that even had an A and B plot. But anyway, I will say, watching this episode again, I did appreciate it a little more. I think, not to give too many spoilers for my rating at the end, but I think my rating is going to go up a little bit from what it was previous. Just because I do really appreciate the scenes with Wesley and Picard. I actually thought they were quite beautiful. In fact, I appreciate them now that I'm older, because particularly the line where Picard says, "Oh, I envy you, Wesley. You're just at the beginning of your journey," where being sort of over the hill, as they say, and sort of on the past the halfway point of my life, I really sympathize with that. I really can see Picard's perspective, and I also look at younger people and be like, God, I envy you. I wish I could do that. So, and that's something I never really cared about when I was younger. When I was 12 years old, I could not relate to that. I didn't give a shit. I did have my life ahead of me. But now that line seems a lot more powerful. And yeah, and just the bonding of Wesley saying, I've always wanted you to be proud of me, and Picard saying, I want you to know I always was proud of you. Like, these are really touching moments. And then Picard sort of chastising himself as like, oh, I was selfish because I took you on this mission because I wanted to be, to have an adventure with you one last time. But now you might die because of it. Like, those are great moments. Like, these are some, as I said, this is like they finally give Will Wheaton a lot of good shit to do after he said he wants to leave the show, but at least they're sending him off in style. However, all that being said, the rest of the storyline was awful. Was just cliche nonsense. First of all, a shuttlecraft crashes is one of my least favorite cliches that Star Trek does repeatedly, because it's so boring. And it's, first of all, space is vast, so it's really far-fetched. But, I usually don't care about scientific things, so I can't really hold that against it. But it was more the fact that it's boring. And that I hate, we crash on a planet and we're trying to get rescued. It's just such a cliche and boring premise. And they usually do it to try to create good character stories. Now, in this case, they did manage to have some really good character story scenes between Picard and Wesley. But outside of those scenes, the storyline was a wash. It was terrible. First of all, that drunk Durgo, who, let me look up, I should have looked up the actor's name, because I know he was an Australian actor. I wasn't aware of this at the time. He did a lot of sort of Australian movies and TV, and I did remember seeing him later on Andrew Tate, is that his name? No, Nick Tate. Sorry, Nick Tate. Yeah, I remember seeing him on Lost. He was on the second episode of Lost after the pilot, where he was in like Kate's flashback because she was in Australia. And I'm trying to see what else he's been in. He was in Hook, apparently. I don't remember that. Let's see. What else was he? Apparently, he did the voice for the Mad Max video game. That came out in 2015. I am not recognizing the titles of any of these other things. Farscape. That was filmed in Australia, so that makes sense. I think I remember him being on Farscape. Yeah, but I'm not recognizing the title. Oh, he was in that episode of The X-Files. D Space Nine? What episode of D Space? Oh, right, that's right. He played that at the, what's it called? The one with O'Brien, Honor Among Thieves, when he's an undercover agent infiltrating the Orion Syndicate, and Nick Tate played the Orion Syndicate guy that O'Brien fucks over. He's a good actor. I think he does a really good job. But yeah, I remember when I saw him on Lost, I was like, hey, it's that guy from Final Mission. But anyway, yeah, he's a good actor, but this character in the episode sucks. I mean, he's too obvious an idiot. He's too much of an incompetent moron who's like, oh, I'm the captain of this shuttle. How dare you insult my shuttle? And then he proceeds to fuck up in every single way possible. Like, he's trapped in the desert with no food or water, which, by the way, is his fault for not fucking having food or water. It's like, Picard's like, what about the water? He's like, oh, the replicator, it's broken. I'm like, well, of course the replicator is going to be fucking broken. That's why you have backup actual water on the shuttle. But to be fair, that's partly on Geordi, because Geordi apparently did an inspection to make sure the shuttle was safe before he let Picard and Wesley go in, and somehow Geordi missed the fact that this guy didn't have any fucking backup supplies. So that's kind of a contrivance too, because Geordi would have noticed that and he would have given his, like, here you go, have some of ours. But anyways, but then the episode couldn't happen if that happened. So another contrivance. But anyway, so Durgo proceeds to fucking drink alcohol when he's in the middle of the fucking desert with no water. I'm sorry. Nobody's that stupid. Now you could say that he's an alcoholic, because alcoholics have a disease and sometimes they're not thinking rationally. So, and I've heard that posited that that's why this guy was such a fucking moron, because he was drunk all the time. And then when Wesley took his alcohol away, that's when he got really agitated. But so, okay, I can kind of buy that explanation, but they never stated that outright. I mean, maybe it's implied, but I still feel like you have to be like completely far gone, like super addicted to do something that fucking stupid, to drink alcohol, which is going to dry you, which is going to dehydrate you when you're trapped in the desert with no fucking water. Anyway, I just didn't like this character and how he's the one, he is his fault that Picard got severely injured because he was firing his phaser when they were telling him to stop, because it's obviously a bad idea. And then he was like, oh, just leave Picard for dead. There's no way he's going to survive this. Let's save our water for us. And Picard's like, I'd appreciate it if you not bury me before I'm actually dead. So I hate that guy. I hate him. But that is not the worst part of this episode. The worst part of this, and this episode is so like filled with plot contrivance. The worst part of the episode is the fact that why is there a big bubbling fountain on a planet that's uninhabited and these mountains in the middle of the fucking desert? And why the fuck is there a super advanced, sophisticated force field around it that will kill anyone who tries to take the force field down or fire on it? Like, who would put that there and why? Now, I've heard some speculation on who would have done that. Like, maybe there was someone who used to, who was living on that moon and they were hiding there, or maybe outlaw or something, and that they were using that as their water supply, and it was didn't have a lot of it, so they wanted to make sure other people didn't steal it, and maybe they have since died or moved on or went somewhere else, and just left that water fountain there. Maybe they were going to plan on coming back and they didn't want people drinking their water while they're gone, but I don't know. I think all these are like pure headcanon, fan-splaining speculation. There's no actual reason given. The real reason is plot contrivance, so the episode can happen. It's really far-fetched. It's just so convenient for the plot that there's this magical force field that can, kill people if they try to take this magical like water fountain that's just bubbling. It's not just like a pond of water. It's like this bubbling fountain. Like, why the fuck is... and they never explain it. It's just there it was one of the most contrived moments in the entire show. So I think if I ever did a contrived episode top 10, which I've been talking about doing, but I need to wait till I've gone through the episodes again, because I don't really remember it, but I'm starting to pick up on them. Like I mentioned, like Bada Bing Bada Bang would be number 1. Bride of Chaotica would be number 2. And I think I've thought of a number 3 before, but I can't remember it. If that number, I can't remember if that number 3 would be worse than this one. So let's call this one number 4. This is the 4th most contrived episode of the Star Trek. It's so contrived. Like the fucking garbage scow plot was so contrived. The magical water fountain with the magical force field that kills people, it's just there in the middle of the fucking desert for no good goddamn reason, is so contrived. And not to mention, I think I failed to mention the main offense of this episode. It's boring. The parts because the parts with Durgo when he's being an idiot and they're going through the desert and they're going do, it's really boring. The bullshit B plot doesn't need to exist, so that's boring. Most of the interactions with Picard and Wesley are boring, save for the few really good ones towards the end of the episode where they bonded. Other than that, the episode's just really boring. Now, I will say this, I'm watching this on the Blu-ray, and they had some deleted scenes. There was a nice little deleted scene where Picard tells Wesley that he looks a lot like his father, and that he kind of how much he misses his father, or Wesley's father. And that would have been really interesting, actually. And then there was another deleted scene, because at the end of the episode, when they show the Enterprise approaching the planet, but they don't show them discovering the shuttle or discovering where Wesley were. I was like, part of me wanted to see that. Like, I actually wanted to see them be like, oh, where are they, and discovering where they are. But part of me thought it was actually better that they just cut to Beverly being there, because you don't really need to see them. But then they were taking Picard and Wesley on stretchers, but Wesley said he could walk. And I'm thinking, why are they taking them where are they taking them with stretchers? Why don't they just beam out of there? But the deleted scene actually answered that question, because apparently there was some BS bullshit that was preventing them from beaming down, so they had to send the shuttle down. And they had that scene that I was expecting, where they had them discover where where Picard was. Now, they didn't really discover exactly where they were in the mountains. They discovered the shuttle, and they had Data, and Riker says, and this is my favorite part of the deleted scene, Riker says to Data, taken away team, which makes so much sense, because, and this is sort of true to the whole best of both worlds thing, part 2, when Riker's in command of the Enterprise, which he is right now, he needs to send his first officer down, which in this case would be the second officer, which is Data, rather than beam down himself. And I didn't even notice that because they focus more on Beverly for a good reason, because of Wesley and everything. And it's a medical situation, so she's taking control. But I didn't even realize that Riker wasn't there. It was just Data and Worf in the background until that deleted scene pointed out that he told Data to take an away team, which is not something we see very often. So I was kind of pissed off they cut it out of the episode. And Beverly is like, "Oh, I'm coming with you," and Data's like, "Of course," which of course it's despite the fact that it's her son down there, it's a medical emergency, so of course she would come with him. But then he also tells Worf to come, and yeah, and I barely even noticed him at the end of the episode, so I kind of missed that deleted scene. But anyway, I would now like to thank my Patreon supporters for supporting me on Patreon. It's very, very much appreciated. It does help the channel grow, help me continue with the channel. So I want to give a very special thanks to Brandon Neal Howes. Thank you so much for your support. And I also want to give a shout out to Antarius, Greg Marley, Francisco, Chuck Hooks, Kyrie091, Anthony D. Benedictus, Ricky Medijester, Joel Viles, Alessandro Michelosio, Norman Buchwald, Stephen Kennedy, Britton Berg, and Allison Fordyce. Thank you so very much for your support. So we do have a few patron comments on this episode. First comment is from Norman Buchwald, who says, "Since I feel I gave too long comments on the last 2 episodes you invited Patreon comments, I'll be brief this time. This episode uses a very old trope where for some odd reason Picard trusts a guide that should have never been trusted, and aside for some nice moments between Picard and Wesley as Will Wheaton leaves as a series regular, this episode is plain boring with one of the oldest water in the desert / cave tropes that exists. 2 flasks filled with alcohol out of 10. Yeah, that was a ridiculous, a ridiculous trope. And one thing I do want to point out for the nitpickers out there, because I said earlier Wesley leaves the show for good. I know Wesley will come back, but as a series regular, as Norman stated, that he leaves the show as a series regular. And I've watched a couple of podcasts and YouTube videos after watching this video, and pretty much all of them got wrong how many times Wesley returned. They always missed some. So let me see if I can get it all straight. So the first one's the game, then there's First Duty, and then it's Journey's End. Then he appears in alternate reality in Parallels, and then it's Nemesis, which they never fucking explain what he's doing there in Nemesis, and also Picard season 2 if you count that, which I don't really, because that is a fucking atrocious and that was so dumb. So yeah, 5 I guess. Yeah, I'm pretty sure I got them all. But anyway, yeah, at the end where Picard says to Wesley, "Oh, I envy you. You're at the start of your journey." Yeah, it turns out his journey is to become a traveler, which is fucking stupid. I didn't hate that much when I first saw it, but it was never sat right with me. But I totally hate it now. But we'll get there. It will be a while until I get to season 7, but we'll get there. Anyway. Next comment is from Kyrie091, who says, "Final mission, more like final miss, son." Actually, I like this episode. I know most don't, but I enjoy it. Well, as they say, to each their own. Anyway, next comment is from Stephen Kennedy, who says, "This is the best Wesley episode, and ironically, it's his last episode as the main cast member. The First Duty isn't really a Wesley episode. It's more about Picard and Tom Paris. Rutherford, he looks like Tom Paris. Boimler, I don't see it. Rutherford, they have the same face. They're identical. Boimler, no, I don't see it. I hope you haven't already reviewed The First Duty, as I have 2 complaints about that episode. They should have renamed this episode Raiders of the Lost Water, as it's similar to the cave scene in Raiders. Oh, I don't even remember that. I'm not a huge fan of that movie, just in case you didn't know. But anyway, did they mention that in the commentary? There wasn't commentary for this episode, unfortunately. They don't have commentary for every episode, only select episodes, and this wasn't selected. Not good enough, I suppose. Anyway, my rating is 7 minutes late. You still forgot to go to the bathroom, and that scene Wesley was swearing because he was crying for number 2 out of 10. So I think I mentioned this to Steven in the comments, but I'll just mention it again that yes, I did already review First Duty, unfortunately, so you won't be able to comment on that unless you sneak it in another episode comment. And I think that I would argue that The First Duty is a Wesley episode. I think it's more about Wesley than it is about Picard or Tom Paris. Was that Nick Locarno? That was his name. Same actor plays Tom Paris. But yeah, I would argue that is a Wesley episode. And not just that, it's my favorite Wesley episode. But anyway, I will say I will get to it when I get to it, but I already got to it. I'll get to it when I get to revisit it for Patreon supporters. So, next comment is from Ricky, who says, Wesley's final episode as a series regular is incredibly boring and uninteresting. I mean, this episode has the typical shuttlecraft crash that is always dull and uninteresting, and also being trapped in the cave and running out of water and almost dying is so boring. And to be perfectly honest, I always have a hard time watching this without falling asleep. But the one saving grace about this episode is the interactions between Picard and Wesley, as I actually liked those scenes and it was quite good and dynamic, but other than that, it sucked. My rating is a 2 out of 10. So, next comment is from Brandon Neal Howells, who says, Picard and Wesley and the Magic Fountain. Not a bad episode, but it could have been so much better. Why do miners consistently cause trouble in Star Trek? If Geordi's security team checked Durgo's ship to see if it was safe, why did no one think to check for water? Why didn't the Enterprise tow the radioactive ship back the way they came instead of taking the long way and having to go through the asteroid belt to get it to the sun? I do enjoy Wesley and Picard saying goodbye, so I'm giving this episode 5 flasks of Dresky out of 10. So it's my understanding with the radioactive ship that they wanted to tow it into the sun to destroy it, because if they just left it lying around, then it would eventually end up becoming a problem from someone else, which actually that logic doesn't track because space is vast. Space is freaking vast. But whatever. Either way, as I mentioned earlier, they could have just put it somewhere safe and did their mission and came back and then threw it into the sun. But whatever, it was all just contrived nonsense to keep the Enterprise away from rescuing them too early. So final comment is from Stephen Kennedy, who says, I noticed something in this episode. Was another comment from Stephen Kennedy, I should say. Anyway, I noticed something in this episode. The ensign standing beside Geordi on the bridge was Ensign J, played by Tracy Coco. She was at a convention in England in 2018, and a friend of mine told me that she was so happy that she was recognized by fans. My friend gave her a data pad with details about her character on TNG. Tracy got up from her chair and ran around the table and gave him a hug. Do apologize if I mispronounced her last name, but that is a nice little story. I'll have to go and look that character up. I'm not sure which character that is. Maybe I'll put a picture on the screen when I'm editing this, but as I'm recording this, I don't remember who that is. But yeah, that's a nice little story. Anyway, thank you so much, patrons, for your comments. So, my rating for Final Mission out of 10 is going to be a 3, very poor. So, when I said I would raise the rating on this episode, you didn't think I was going to do like a 6 or something. No. I used to give this episode a 2, so I'm raising it to a 3. Because I do like the Picard and Wesley stuff. It's really good, as I said, it's really touching, but that's only a tiny fraction of the episode. The rest of the episode, as Ricky states, is crap. It's full of contrivance, it's boring, there's no reason for this magical force field to be around the magical fountain that just so happens to be in the desert that they're trapped in, and there's so much contrivance, and there's no reason for this garbage scowl plot that Riker could have actually solved very easily, but it was contrived to keep them busy because that was the whole point of this boring ass B plot. So, not a good episode. But it was a good way to send Will Wheaton off, I will say, with the scenes between him and Picard. Really a lot of chemistry. Those scenes worked and really built the relationship. So I had to give it at least a 3 just for that. So that is it for my review of Final Mission. So, as I alluded to earlier, next review will be next Monday, will be The Loss, which I will rip that episode apart, just so you know. And then on Wednesday will be Data's Day, my review for Data's Day. Thursday, Discovery is coming out, so I'll review the first 2 episodes of Discovery. And then Saturday I'll be over on Patreon for my revisited for the episode The Wounded, where I will revisit my review for that episode. So that's what's coming up on my channel. Be sure to check it out for all of that and many more Star Trek videos and many more videos and many other shows. So be sure to subscribe so you can keep up with all of that, and thanks a lot for watching.